My colleagues and I are going to talk about peer support practitioners and Housing First, the experience for Turning Point Scotland. I'll give a short introduction to the session and then I'll pass you over to my colleague Jason, who's an Assistant Service Coordinator at our Flexible Homelessness Outreach Support Service in Glasgow. Jason was one of the original peer support practitioners 10 years ago within our legacy service. He'll talk about his experience of taking on the peer support practitioner role and moving on from it. Jason will then hand over to my colleague Laura Stewart, who has been the service manager of our Housing First service in Eastern Bartonshire and currently manages our Renfrewshire Housing First and Housing Support services. Laura will cover her experience of managing peer support practitioners, as well as why are we reviewing this role now. And finally, they'll just pass the baton back to myself, who'll cover a wee bit about the research that we're completing on peer support practitioners in a Housing First service and just some of the early themes that are coming up for us. We'll then all come back onto the screen just to answer any questions that people have, and if you pop any of them in the comments box just to the side of the screen, Graham will ask us them at the end. So just before I pass you over to Jason, I just wanted to outline the objectives of our research and just a bit about why we decided to employ peer support practitioners. So the objectives that we set ourselves were review how potential external candidates view the advertisement of the role of peer support practitioner and what their expectations of the role are. Review how current peer support practitioners view and implement their role and whether their expectations were met. Review how peer support practitioners are recruited, inducted and developed. Review how managers view and implement the role. Review how service users view and experience the role. And finally, contrast the view of support practitioners, managers and peer support practitioners across Housing First services and Housing Support services. So as an organisation, we decided to employ peer support practitioners for two reasons. When our late colleague Ian Irvin went to New York, colleagues remembered him talking about the impact he felt the peer roles over there had for service users. It also fit with our ethos at the time of ensuring we made services fit people. We felt that using this lived experience of workers within the support process helped us basically to achieve that. And we recognised that peer support workers were experts by experience and they could give something to the support process that non-peers couldn't. And on that basis, we made the commitment to employ salaried workers with lived experience of problematic alcohol and other drug use. And in those early days, I'd probably be naive to say that we knew how great the impact the role could have for service users, peer support practitioners and other staff. And I just hope that today we can convey some of those experiences for you. Okay, so I'll just pass you over to Jason just to cover his experiences in the role.
And hi everybody, and thanks Niggy for that, and an extended welcome. And I hope everybody's enjoyed the conference up until now, and thanks to the speakers so far as well. And as Nicky says, my name's Jason Connor, and I'm an Assistant Coordinator with the FOSS service in Turning Point. And I've been with Turning Point for 10 years now, starting off as a peer support practitioner with the Housing First Legacy Service. And I'm going to share a wee bit of my own experience in regards to being a peer support practitioner. Just before I go on and touch on to the peer support practitioner, I'll give you a wee bit of insight on how I got to that position. After coming through a long, chaotic life of drug use and repeated homelessness, I made a change in my life around about 2007, 2008, for the better, need I say, and started in my own recovery process and started to change my life slowly but surely. And for the first couple of years of my recovery, the most important thing to me to have around about me was my peers and their experience. Sharing their experience and giving me their experience, how they managed to get through difficult times and live life as they live the day. And at that point, that was my most important tool in my recovery. and it was dead important for myself to have that good peer group around me to get to where I believe I'm at today at that time in my journey. Now, after the first 2 years of my recovery, I applied for a post in a trainee addiction worker and completed that within a year. And that involved 3 different placements within the homeless and addiction sector. And I believe that gave me a good platform to come into the care field. And that brings me nicely on to where I want to be in regards to the peer support role. Just as that role was finishing and the trainee addiction worker post, I seen Turning Point put an advert out for peer support practitioner, and that was right down my street. The advert was telling me that I'd be expected to, there would be an expectation of me sharing my own experience with individuals to support them through their addiction and to support them into their own tendencies and sustain that tendency and hopefully find the recovery. The recovery path is that if that's what they were looking for. My understanding at that time was we were going to aim it at the hard to reach, so-called hard to reach service users. That was the people who was entrenched and had been rough sleeping for many years, maybe caught up with addiction, alcoholism for a number of years, similar to my own experience. And the people that were looking to be housed and receive the support. And as Nicky says, my main asset of the job that I could bring to at that time, was the experience, that lived experience, which I believe was the added value that I could give in the job, sharing that experience with the service user. And I knew that was the most powerful thing I'd received in my own recovery, so it was dead important for myself to use that tool when I went in with the service users and let them know a wee bit about my chaotic lifestyle when I was back here, but more important, it was trying to get that message across to them that they too can recover and can overcome the barriers that they're facing and be in the position I was sitting at and when I was providing that support to them. That wee glimmer of hope, the cliche, a glimmer of hope can go a long way. That can be the first step in a person's journey in the recovery, and it's like planting these seeds each time I go into the service user, planting different seeds, giving them different tools and allowing them different ways to make, allowing them to make their own decisions, allowing them knowing that they were going to make mistakes and they're going to go backwards sometimes, but being there to continue to support them through the journey, and that was very important for me. And perseverance and persistence with somebody went a long way as well, and that was something I never had in my own journey. You heard the guy speak about it earlier when they were interviewing the service user. It was somebody chatting that door to make sure you were okay. Or somebody always being there for you, no matter what, no matter if you'd failed or didn't fail, whatever that term failed didn't fail means to yourself. There were certain challenges along the way, and one of them was the engagement levels for the service users. But we picking away, getting up and champing their door, going to their begging sites, taking them for a coffee. 9 out of 10 times that allowed me to know that my service user was okay and they were making that wee step forward in their life. And for the first time, the first time ever for some, the first time in a long time for others, they were able to manage and get by in their own homes, a place of safety where they could go back to at night and they could call theirs. And to me, that was special for that reason. And being part of that journey of Housing First Legacy service and being the peer support practitioner within that service will never leave me because it was something special. It was a part of my recovery journey as well, and it's helped me develop into the role that I hold today, and it's helped me become the person that I am today. And for that, I'll be forever grateful to that service. I'm going to finish in this. There was a wee quote I heard last week. I was speaking to an old colleague and he gave us a wee quote last week, and I like my quotes, and it goes like this. Life can be better understood backwards, but it's a pity it must be lived forward. Well, thanks for listening, everybody. I hope you enjoy the rest of your conference, and I'm now going to pass you over to my colleague Laura. Yeah. Thanks again.
Hi there. Thanks, Jason. That was really interesting. I just want to talk about how I manage peers. And I've managed peer workers in a variety of services, namely criminal justice, addiction, community rehabs, and more recently with Housing First Services in East Dunbartonshire and Renfrewshire. Peer workers within the Housing First Service are employed on the same grade as a support practitioner, and they're recruited in the same way and go through the same induction process. The only difference being the peer component of the role and the expectation that the peer's lived experience is used as a motivating factor for service user engagement. There are a few points within the peer recruitment and induction process that diverge, namely an awareness that peers, particularly if this is their first employment, could face additional stresses and pressures. This is discussed at the interview stage when the potential peer support practitioner is asked about their lived experience and recovery journey. During this discussion, it's highlighted that many Housing First Service users are actively using substances, and as an outreach service, staff meet service users in their own environment. So this can expose staff to viewing drug paraphernalia and/or alcohol, and it's important to explore how the potential peer feels about this due to the risks of triggers. Some peer interviewees can be anxious around disclosing their criminal justice history, as they feel that this will prohibit them from accessing employment. It's important to reassure potential candidates that, as this is part of their lived experience, it will not impact negatively on the interview outcome. In my experience, peers with lived experience are strongly motivated to encourage clients to engage in addiction services and recovery groups. They use their own experiences as a motivator for change. Managers should have an understanding of how the support needs of peers may diverge from the support needs of other staff and should be able to provide differing supports within the team without creating inequality in the way staff are treated. So some of the issues that can arise with managing peers include stress and substance-related cues, which can be a significant factor in relapse. Occasionally, peers can exhibit unrealistic expectations by measuring their own recovery journey to those that they are supporting, and also maintaining boundaries, which are an important part of managing all staff. However, there are some additional issues that may only impact on those with lived experience. Peers may come across past associates, which can be a negative or positive experience for peers and service users alike. This should always be disclosed and managed sensitively. It's important that peers are encouraged and given the opportunity to discuss any concerns that they have in a supportive environment. Experience and research suggests that peer support workers, teams and service users can all benefit from the enhanced perspective offered by peer support. Peers can develop a positive working relationship with the people they support based on empathy and empowerment. And although there's limited research and evidence that the impact of peer workers improves service user outcomes, in my opinion, this is not necessarily the case, and I would point to soft outcomes, which are difficult to evidence, but can be significant markers of importance. It can take many small steps to achieve any significant outcome, particularly in clients with multiple complex needs. There can also be some misconceptions around managing peers, that they will require more support, that they'll have higher levels of absence sick. Again, I would stress that in my experience, Those issues vary from individual staff members, irrespective of their job title. And through the years, I've had many lively debates with peer support practitioners around recovery experiences and methods where mutual learning has occurred and which has informed me and my colleagues' practice and knowledge. And on a personal level, there's nothing more satisfying than observing somebody excel in their job, flourish with increased confidence and skills. Which brings me on to why we are doing the research. Turning Point Scotland have encouraged peer roles in Housing First services, as we have said, since 2010. So after 10 years, we're now reviewing the whole process from the original setup with the aim of identifying current and past staff, service users, potential candidates, try and gauge the view of the role of peer support practitioners within a Housing First service. Attitudes have changed over the years, and peer workers with lived experience are now embedded in many areas across social care, across the sector. And it exists in many different forms, and there can be at times a bit of ambiguity around it. So the findings of this research will assist us to have a consistent approach across the whole organisation with regards to the peer role. And now I'll hand you over to Nikki, who has some details of the research that we've been carrying out. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Laura. That was really informative. And I just wanted to say a thanks to Jason as well. That was an extremely powerful presentation of your experience there, Jason. And I think it's important for everybody to know that I didn't know Jason was a peer and had lived experience before preparing for this conference. And that should be the case. And it's Jason's decision of whether he decides to share that when he's moved on from that peer role. I want to talk a wee bit, just briefly, about the research methods that we're using in the research. It's been co-designed by colleagues on a steering group from across Turning Point Scotland services, and we decided to deliver the focus groups to gather evidence from peer support practitioners, past and present, and managers from our Housing First services. For comparison, we also delivered focus groups for the same staff in our housing support services. Additionally, we spoke to potential candidates for the peer support practitioner role. All the focus groups were delivered with up to 8 people, just to ensure that we gather wide enough views to show validity. However, not enough that basically meant that the research became unwieldy. COVID did make it difficult for us to speak to service users across the country, and it was agreed that this would happen in a one-to-one interview, either over Zoom or on the phone at the discretion of service users. I need to say that we need to treat the emerging themes with caution, as we haven't finished the research. However, I wanted to just chat a little bit about these themes. There was some very emotive discussions around how much people love the job and the impact the role has, not just for service users. Peer workers themselves universally felt that they were able to give something different from non-peer workers. And one worker, Lynn, who was also a previous service user supported in a TPS Housing First service, stated, being supported by a service user, I was introduced as a peer support practitioner. I related to the peers more than anyone else, as they've been through the same chaos as me. They gave me something different, enthusiasm, gave me hope for the future. My peer support practitioner was special to me. Again, universally, the word peer doesn't seem to be used in line with its definition of someone of equal social standing, as it can be argued that a worker isn't of equal social standing to a service user. However, universally, people understood the role of the peer worker. There was an acceptance that having the peer in the title comes with some negatives, but the positives significantly outweighed the negatives across the stakeholder groups. Having peer in the title was welcomed by many peer support practitioners and service users so far, with others saying it didn't really matter to them, and a minority feeling like it shouldn't be in the title. Again, universally, it was felt that the difference between peer workers and other workers with lived experience is that peer workers must use their lived experience in a safe way, at the right time, and the right way. Other workers can choose to use their lived experience. Peer workers stated to us that it was their choice how much they shared. Many people talked about keeping service users in control of how much they wanted to know about their workers' lived experience. So examples were given where some service users were happy to know that the worker had lived experience of problematic alcohol or other drug use. Others wanting more details, as they felt that that built a level of trust and attachment to their worker. Many workers expressed that they knew where the line was. One reflection gave insight into a time where they overstepped that mark, and the telling of their story became about them rather than using it as a tool needed to help the service user. Interestingly, service users so far have commented that they felt the worker didn't need to go into detail about their lived experience, just the nature of it, as they felt the details were private to the worker. Participants were posed a statement, and that read, "It's been suggested that it's not important to know about my lived experience. It's important to know what I've learned from this experience." And peer support practitioners felt it was a bit of both, while service users agreed with this statement in its entirety. Despite significant praise for the role, there's some aspects and differences of opinion and practice in different areas of the organisation, such as progressing from a peer to a non-peer role or a management role, whether the role is time limited, and expectations of non-peers, etc. In the last 10 years, we have used criteria for peers that insisted on 2 years abstinent from alcohol and other drugs. And I've still to speak to someone who agrees with that language in this statement, never mind the specific timescale. We delivered this after a discussion with a partner 10 years ago who had implemented the same. And I'm told that they implemented this due to other organisations' unwillingness to take workers in placement unless they had 2 years abstinence. Peer support practitioners actually felt that 2 years were needed to be in a good position in their recovery, to be able to see service users with drug paraphernalia potentially around their house. But interestingly, service users to date talked about 6 months to 1 year. The peer support practitioners themselves stated that when they were in recovery themselves, they thought it would be a shorter period as well. Peer workers spoke extremely warmly and highly of the support they received from managers. However, in questioning the difference between the support they received and the support they see non-peers receiving, they didn't see any difference. Managers confirmed that they didn't specifically give peers more or less support than non-peers. Each individual would get the support that they needed. The feedback for the potential candidates was very consistent with all other participants' feedback. There was some insightful feedback on the wording and bolding of certain parts of the advert, and we need to look into that in more detail. Potential candidates highlighted, as Laura had suggested, conflicts of interest in certain communities for individuals, and ensuring that's part of the induction. And in comparison to workers in a housing support service, the overall views were extremely consistent, and to date, nothing of note of any substantial difference. So just kind of moving on, I know it's still early, but based on the preliminary findings, we want to see some recommendations emerging from changes to our future policy and practice. Firstly, to continue to work towards embedding our people first language, plain English, and consider removing the bolding and other aspects of formatting. In the interviews and the adverts, review and ensure consistency in the recruitment, induction, development, and progression of peer workers. Also consider why we wouldn't use that same learning for non-peer posts who may have lived experience also. Consider how we would embed the ethos of value and lived experience throughout all our policies and procedures and posts within the organisation. Develop learning opportunities for staff and volunteers on how to use their lived experience safely, and understanding the peer role and how to support and develop the role. This should be developed with peers and service users And I would challenge my colleagues that if the learning is decided to be face-to-face on this, consider how this could be delivered with peers and service users included. Surprisingly to myself, it looks like the research is telling us to keep the word peer in the job title, but ensure that we're clear about the policies, inner policies and procedures, that we consider the positives and negatives of how we might mitigate any negatives. And finally, move away from a timescale and the language used around certain time away from alcohol and other drug use. We want to focus on developing a tool that assesses someone's recovery capital, of which time away from problematic use or dependency on alcohol or other drugs is one of several aspects. I'm aware that throughout this review, we've talked a lot about lived experience and not living experience. And that's something I need to talk in more detail with my colleagues as we do recognise that. I just want to finish by saying that hearing directly from participants in this research has been really extremely powerful and quite emotional at times. But 10 years on, we're doing many of the things in line with the principles that we set out 10 years ago. However, there's areas that we need to get a bit better at. And there's other areas where our views on delivering a trauma-informed response for staff and service users through our policy and practice has moved on, and we need to adjust our approach slightly. Okay, thanks. Both myself and the panel are happy to take questions both on anything we've talked about or anything a bit more left field.
Well, thank you very much, Nikki, Jason and Laura. I'm looking at some of the questions coming through, and we actually have some feedback for Jason. Jason, people really enjoyed your quote, and I would like to start off by asking you, Jason, could you give that quote one more time, and then also to talk about what are some of the challenges you faced working as a peer support practitioner?
The quote, first of all, is life can be better understood backwards. It's a pity it must be lived forwards. And to me, that's just about hindsight, isn't it? Yeah, and being able to share my experience with the service user and where things may lead them, and and what path they could be going down and what path they can choose when coming to. And that's where that quote kind of touched me. And I love wee quotes like that. I hadn't heard that one, and I've heard a lot of quotes along my journey, and I hadn't heard that one, and it stuck with me. Second part of the question, challenges. I think I mentioned one of the challenges in the thing there was the engagement of service users. Try to get service users to engage, and one of the non-negotiables a housing first are the stickability and that perseverance and being able to go in and champ that person's door time and time again to make sure they're okay, to make sure they're safe and well, and never giving up on them and knowing that somebody will be there to never give up on them. That was I says it in the comment, the speech I made earlier, that was something special to myself. Another challenge that we found way back at the start was getting people to understand the housing first model, because it was difficult. We were that used to the staircase model. And a lot of my service users that I was supporting at the time, we were supporting them into the casework team, etc. And a lot of the caseworkers weren't understanding at that time the housing first model. And how we overcame that was putting presentations into the casework team, getting them to understand what the housing first model was, etc. Yeah, so there was a lot of other challenges, but that was two that stuck with me. It was your non-engagement, trying to get your head round about, we're not going to give up on you. We want you to make this. We want you to achieve what you can achieve in life, and getting people to know what the housing first model was.
Thanks for that, Jason. The second part of the question would be, what would you say you found as your biggest successes working with the housing first?
Yeah. Do you know, it's a question I always ask, because it's hard to gauge success in somebody, and I think it's just, I was saying that to Nikki the other day.
Nikki, perhaps you could talk more about some of the successes.
Yeah, happy to do that. So I suppose for myself, it's really about being out in services and hearing. I don't often get a lot of contact with service users, but the contact that I do have with service users and with staff, I think that was the problem over the years. Everything that we had was very anecdotal and extremely emotional and really very, very kind of emotive stories that we were hearing. And I think that's the reason why we decided to do this, because we were meeting people and trying to explain, kind of express how much impact this role had, not for individuals that done the role and how that helped them move on in their life, but also for service users. I think some people felt that moving on to a peer support practitioner role was a changing part in their life, where other people feel that it was the recovery that was the kind of really changing part in their life, and whether they get involved. Some of our peer support practitioners volunteer as part of our TPS Connects, which is our service user involvement vehicle, and there's avenues that people can move into employment. So I think for me, it does what it says in the tin. It really, really does, and it's hard to capture that. And I think, yeah, just as I mentioned, that's why we're doing what we're doing. Is really just to try and obviously it won't be the same level as what Sarah can do with academic, but we hope it does in a level just talking people straight and in plain English that this is the impact it has, and this is how you can go about doing it. So we'd welcome supporting anybody that is doing it or looking to do that, and we can support them with what we've learned.
Yeah, thanks for that, Nikki. And I know that yourself, Nikki and Laura, you've talked about the recruitment process and the steps in there. We've got a question here which asks, do you have any tips about how to support Housing First residents to become peer workers, should they want to?
Will I answer that, Nikki?
Yeah, I can come in after you, by the way, yeah.
I think the first thing that we would do is encourage any service user in Housing First into the likes of recovery services. So either in Connects, and funnily enough, I had an inquiry this week from a former Housing First service user who had managed 18 months in recovery and now wanted to do some voluntary positions. I probably encourage them to look at the SDF website for the addiction workers training post, which is an excellent training programme. And I've sent them on information about Connects. I think it's quite a big leap from being a service user to move straight into paid employment. And I think through the years I have recognised that there needs to be a kind of bridge in the middle where we concentrate on building confidence and self-esteem. So from going from a service user straight into paid employment, it's possible for some people, but I think I would be encouraging the bit in the middle where they maybe do some voluntary work, join recovery services and work on their confidence and self-esteem so that they're sure that that's the role that they want to go into. And it's not just maybe an after effect of being part of a service.
I probably would, I'm maybe let you in after this, Jason. Some people think that because people have helped them with their issues, they feel that they owe the system something. They don't owe the system anything. The system owes them. The system failed them. And I think that's where we've got to be careful that people don't think that they just need to give back because they've been given something from the system.
Yeah, I would agree in that, but I do a big part of my journey early doors was also about giving back into the community and putting a wee bit back into the community as well. And touching on what Laura says, I think there needs to be that bit of stability, and we were throwing the question about last week about how long, is a 2-year sort of mark, why do we need to have that sort of thing? And one of the things that I often think of, what happens if somebody has a slip, at 6 months, or 6 years? Do they need to wait a further 2 years before they become a peer support worker? Yeah, and I think that's some of the questions we need to get our head about. And to me, it's about what a person's got around about them, and the support that they've got around about them. And I think that's what we need to focus on, rather than the length of time that that somebody needs to be clean or abstinent away from certain substances before they become a peer support worker. Yes, there needs to be a window period of stability after the recovery, definitely. Focus on themselves, get to know themselves, and then take that step forward into employment. That's what I would put in.
Well, thank you very much for your presentation and answering some of those questions. We do have more questions coming through. We're going to approve these questions, and I'm sure Nikki, Laura, or Jason will get the opportunity to reply to them. The last two things I just want to say would be, Jason, could you give us that quote one last time? Because we're getting so many likes on it that I'm sure people would just want to write it down.
Yep. It's not mine. I'm going to claim it now. Yeah, but it's not mine. Yeah, but as I say, life can be better understood backwards. It's a pity it must be lived forwards.
And the last thing I just want to say to those participating, watching, that if you would like to join the next session, which is on European participation, we would recommend that you refresh the page just to make sure you go into the second stream. So thank you very much, everybody, for your presentations, and I hope you all enjoyed that watching. Thank you.
Thank you.